Good morning and welcome to today's webinar on Emerging Leaders Programs. My name is Severia and I'm the Communications Manager for Transforming Youth Outdoors, also known as TYO. TYO was created to scale the impact of outdoor youth development and transform the lives of youth by providing best practices, tools, and support to individuals and organizations working with youth. We are committed to providing resources and support to those working in and for the outdoors. Membership to TYO is free, and you can sign up at mytyo.org. Our webinar series is just one of the many ways that TYO connects you to experts and valuable learning opportunities. It is my pleasure today to welcome Shante Salabert from the TYO team, who will share some insights into the importance of emerging leader programs. We also have with us today Juan Martinez from Fresh Tracks, Jeanette Stosky from the Association of Outdoor Recreation and Education, and Tyler Ray from the American Hiking Society to share more about their emerging leader programs and to answer any questions that you may have. Shante, thanks for kicking this off for us today.
All right, it's my pleasure. Good morning, everybody. So before we dive in with our panelists, I just wanted to talk quickly about sort of this idea of emerging leaders and emerging leader programs. So when we talk about emerging leaders, we're really talking about typically people who are early career professionals, young adults, sometimes college students, or the generation we might call millennials, but people who are typically at the start of their careers. And emerging leaders come from all walks of life. Really, the goal is to reflect the true diverse nature of humans in the United States and in programs across the world. And so these emerging leaders are often interested in issues of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and all of the intersections of those, especially as they pertain to the outdoors, and especially as they pertain to sort of increasing access to the outdoors in their home communities and across the states. So emerging leaders want to basically hone their own skills so that they can go back and affect change back in their communities with the organizations they work in, and so on. So next slide. When we're talking about emerging leaders programs, you're going to hear, excuse me, about 3 specific programs today, and you'll hear kind of how those programs work. But in general, these programs can happen in a lot of different ways. Often, emerging leaders programs are run through universities and colleges. They can be part of existing organizations, some of which you'll hear from today. Or they could be standalone programs that were created to address a specific need or something in a specific area. So generally, these programs are structured around what we call a cohort of people, a collection of people that are gathered at a specific time, and their participation in the program may be time limited. So it could be a 3-month program, a 6-month program, a year program. But even though there might be these time limitations, the idea is that the skills and the networking that they've built within these programs is something they're going to take with them forever. And often there's this really great back end built in that these emerging leaders receive support. So they receive support from their, from the other leaders in the program. They receive support from staff in the program. And these networks get stronger and stronger through time. So these programs typically have what might be sort of an initial training or onboarding event, maybe a conference or camp sort of situation where people meet up for the first time and start to dig into what this work looks like. And then from there, there's the ongoing support and learning as time continues. So there might be webinars, there might be Facebook groups, chat groups, things like that to keep people invested in the work and to keep the community vibe going. And so these programs overall, and you'll hear again specifically about 3 different programs today, these programs are designed to sort of build and develop skills that will help people work on advocacy, activism, community organizing, leadership, and especially as we're talking about today, as it pertains to the outdoors and increasing outdoor access. So we just have a few examples of emerging leaders programs here that are specifically geared toward the outdoors, but you can find so many more out there. That's what's amazing, is that it seems like every week, every month, every year, we're hearing about more and more programs, and the work of these programs is starting to overlap in a really amazing way. So I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say, and I will turn it back over to Severia.
Thank you, Shante. All right, so we are really excited today to welcome our presenters. As I mentioned earlier, we have Juan, Jeanette, and Tyler. And so each of our presenters are going to talk a little bit about their programs, and then we are going to open it up to Q&As and questions. So we are going to start with Juan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juan Martinez. I am one of the co-founders of Fresh Tracks. Fresh Tracks is dedicated to uplifting and advancing the youth-led cross-cultural revolution rooted in the outdoors. A couple of ways that we do this is by building transformative cross-cultural action networks, amplifying youth voice and shaping civic power, drawing strength from our natural surroundings, building and trusting equity-driven partnerships based on shared values. So next slide, please. Fresh Tracks is really unique in that it is officially part of the Center for Native American Youth, based out of the Aspen Institute, and it's operated in partnership with the Children in Nature Network's Natural Leaders Network, the Aspen Institute's Opportunity Youth Forum, and My Brother's Keeper initiative out of the Obama Foundation, as well as our partners at Opportunity Youth United. For those that may not be familiar with the term Opportunity Youth, it's a term that I've come to learn over the last couple of years. Opportunity Youth means anybody, any young leader between the ages of 18 and 25 who is looking for the opportunity to engage with the workforce or their education pathway. And so it's really framed around creating those opportunities where there aren't opportunities and addressing those systems of inequity. Fresh Tracks really stands as one of the few programs out there that I know of that is being led by a Native American organization that benefits the entire youth community. And so it's unique in a couple of different perspectives, where our focus is in addressing inequitable access to opportunity, whether that's through nature, whether that's through the education system, whether that's through healthcare system, whether that's through the legal system. And it uses the outdoors and nature as a platform of engagement and community building. So next slide, please. So we do this in a couple of different ways. One of them is we start off with the Fresh Tracks training. And so last year we hosted our 2018 regional trainings across the U.S. The first one was in the Northeast near Boston out of Access Woods. Then we hosted one in LA, California for the West Coast, and then one in the Midwest outside of in Indiana Sand Dunes for the Midwest, and then the Southwest was based out of Ghost Ranch, Abiquiu, New Mexico. And through these trainings, our leaders go through an intensive training on how to develop a personal narrative, how to identify their own leadership style, how to implement that leadership, how to build community consensus, all built around one key aspect of that, and that's building community action plans. And so after the training, they leave with this community action plan draft. They are paired in peer-to-peer mentor groups afterwards, and they are given access to an opportunity fund where these community actions can actually be implemented through some of the micro grant funding that we can provide to these young leaders throughout the year. So actually right now we're in the middle of that community action implementation. Our leaders are out in their communities putting these plans into place, and they're being mentored along with their own peers, learning about each other. All of this in terms to leading up to our Trainers Summit coming up this summer, where some of these the leaders who wish to take their leadership skill sets to the next level, from being recipients and learning these skill sets to actually being able to share these skill sets out into their communities, and to the youth cohort of Fresh Tracks can have the opportunity to become trainers and thus become peer-to-peer mentors and host groups as well. I have to highlight that none of this would be possible without the support of REI, the REI Foundation, the Newman's Own Foundation, as well as the Walmart Foundation, who have been big champions of our work over the last year and in making this happen, as well as our community partners who are at the local and regional level and continue to be a source of inspiration and source of championship. So our whole focus is not necessarily to take credit for a lot of what these leaders are already doing, but to equip them with the skill sets that they need to go back to their communities, to their organizations, and continue being the leaders that we're asking them to be for the community. And that's a quick recap of Fresh Tracks. Look forward to learning more about what's out there, as well as connecting with any of you that are interested.
Awesome. Thanks, Juan. Jeanette?
Hello, friends. My name is Jeanette Stosky, and I'm the Executive Director for AORE. That's the Association for Outdoor Recreation and Education. And AORE's mission is to provide opportunities for both professionals and students in the field of outdoor recreation education to exchange information, promote the preservation and conservation of the natural environment, address issues common to college, university, military, community, and other not-for-profit outdoor rec and ed programs. So that's kind of our all-encompassing mission statement for the association. And we try to advance that through empowering and connecting people through enriching outdoor experiences. And that's what kind of my member programs are doing all around the United States and often overseas if they're at a military garrison. We know that we think that creating a world where outdoor experiences are a fabric or part of the fabric of every outdoor community benefits all. And as a 501c3, we try to provide the tools, the services and opportunities to advance those professionals and paraprofessionals, people entering the profession, with ways to be successful. AORE entered into developing an emerging leaders program about 2 years ago with some support from the National Park Service. And what we tried to do here is basically say, outside of AORE's current community, which has really been centric on college and universities, what and who are doing good work that might stretch both the membership and those that my members serve. And so we actively tried to go out and look at people who had a breadth and depth of knowledge, these young professionals who could bring back to the AORE community and both challenge and increase awareness in AORE land of work and opportunities that were out there, as well as make sure that these young professionals could see how they could make further impacts, that they didn't need to be limited to one career space or one career way. So again, our ELP-specific mission, which you can see on the slide here, is to advance the professionals and students in outdoor rec and ed to provide space and opportunity for emerging professionals in outdoor rec and ed, conservation, so they can network and learn, as well as make a concentrated effort to reach populations historically and currently underrepresented. We've been able to go through an application process and then bring these young professionals into the association, where they attend our annual conference and a summit before the start of AORE's annual convention. Our annual convention has between 700 to 750 college, university, military, and non-for-profit outdoor educator recreation providers on site over 3 days, with both a research symposium and over 80 education sessions. So everything from how to build and manage a climbing wall to how to expand diversity, equity, inclusion opportunities through the programs that you lead or administer, or career pathways with the Career HQ Center. So bringing these young professionals in through a summit, meeting with the Leadership Institute, and working directly with my board of directors gives them an opportunity to have exposure to a national nonprofit leadership in leadership roles. And again, try to elevate that, because AORE can serve all, from the Wilderness Society to NOLS or Outward Bound, small groups, big groups. There's kind of a large depth and breadth of people and personalities to interact with. So these young professionals, ideally recent graduates or in their 20s, who are doing this work, you can kind of see the list of last year's class again on your screen, who came in and then were able to speak not only along themselves as a cohort, but work with attendees at the conference, and then we're matched up with mentors after they leave the conference, and are currently having one-on-ones either every month or bi-monthly. And so we've been able to match our young professionals with industry leads to have phone calls, to ask questions, to transfer. So they'll apply what they learn and use these connections to be more effective, and perhaps open up further opportunities or doors for them. Go ahead for the next slide, please. So, just try to reflect about, how these opportunities here, these are some quotes from our assessment. So part of AORE's Emerging Leaders program has been doing kind of a pre-study, some metrics, a pre-survey where we administered to the participants about their perception of their own leadership skills, their mentorship goals, and level of confidence in various leadership and advocacy areas. And then we've administered a post-survey following the conference and after 6 months to see how and if we were able to help support them along their growth journey. And so that's allowed us to, again, reflect to see if our program is having success or not, to amplify the things that are working, and then to do a deep dive on areas that may be under concern, or things that both my association, the board, or myself could do better to better serve these populations. Some other neat aspects of our ELP program is there's an opportunity to host an on-site snap or collaborate session, and those kind of are impromptu sessions. So if you've ever attended a professional conference, there's tends to be tracks or a curriculum that you can follow. And AORE has created a space for pop-up sessions, and so these might be where certain communities that identify in a certain way or a topic that we weren't able to collect when we did the call for proposals half a year out can come together. And so these ELP participants have been able to host these on site, which has been very, very exciting. We've also created and curated opportunities for them to advance their own social media and professional ways to, again, amplify the work that they're doing. These young people that we've had a chance to work with are doing things that are just absolutely tremendous. And so any way that we can shed a light on it and open doorways or opportunities or leads for them as they grow themselves or their businesses or their work is just fantastic. And then also just talking about reflections, their personal stories and journeys that we can highlight them through our own social media is another way that AORE has been able to deliver that. So that's maybe an overview of AORE's Emerging Leader Program, which again both is on site at our annual conference, and then includes a mentorship program that operates year-round following the experience. And again, I look forward to answering any questions and seeing what else I can answer at the end of the presentation.
Great, thanks, Jeanette. Tyler, you're up.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Ray. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy for the American Hiking Society. American Hiking is the only national organization that represents the millions of hikers across the country. Our mission is to empower all to enjoy, share, and preserve the hiking experience, and we work to accomplish this through both advocacy before the federal government and through local on-the-ground stewardship programs. To ensure that our hiking experience is protected and preserved, we advocate before Congress and federal agencies for pro-hiking policies, protection of public lands, and funding for trails. You may have seen recently in the news that Congress passed the sweeping public lands package, which the president is actually supposed to sign this afternoon. As part of kind of that larger community effort, American Hiking Society worked on the passage of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, new trails designations, and other provisions that are specifically designed to benefit hikers and ensure more access for hikers. And so we combine advocacy with stewardship, and on the stewardship side, we run week-long volunteer trips that are called volunteer vacations, as well as a college emerging leader-focused trips called alternative breaks. And these stewardship trips provide individuals of all skill levels the opportunity to give back to the trails they love. In particular, our alternative break program, which is run by my colleague Olivia Wild, we started that in 2008 with just 2 schools participating. And since then, we have worked with over 80 groups to organize trail service projects that are geared specifically towards college students. And how this works is the parks that are hosting the volunteers receive volunteer aid at a crucial time in the early spring, right before their busy summer season begins. And it allows students to experience an outdoor service trip that is both organized and catered to those who are new to the outdoor recreation and trail maintenance. It allows the participants kind of their first foray into outdoor service, with many of them often returning to their schools and investing their future time in similar work and kind of being inspired to become public land advocates, as well as kind of creating connections with professionals that can help them guide them in the right direction. And so along with that, we also host an annual nationwide event called National Trails Day, which is always the first Saturday of June. And that partners with local organizations and land managers with the goal of connecting more people to trails. And so kind of as we take this approach of combining stewardship and advocacy to really kind of protect the hiking experience, we launched our NextGen Trail Leader Program 2 years ago. And this program is designed as a year-long effort. And next slide, please. This program is a year-long effort that brings together rising stars in the outdoor community to provide them with the skills and experience to both become effective advocates and stewards of our public lands. How our program is set up is we select 5 individuals each year from across the country who represent the wide diversity of the hiking community, and each of them who bring a unique background and perspective. This year, for example, our participants include a minister from Utah who runs their own outdoor nonprofit for children, a long-distance hiker from Colorado who shares her experiences as a Black woman on the trail, a college student from San Luis Obispo, California, who, recognizing and kind of seeing the lack of opportunities for her indigenous migrant community, began her own nonprofit called Get Out, Stay Out. We also have a self-described small town chick from Kansas who has participated in multiple volunteer vacations and uses her free time to explore the mountains in the Midwest. And then we also have a diversity consultant, a national speaker from Seattle, who works to expand the narrative of those who are portrayed outside. And so that's a perspective of who is part of our program. And now I want to go in a little bit into kind of what the program offers. To kick off the program each year, it consists of an advocacy training and participation in Hike the Hill, which is our annual advocacy week in Washington, D.C. This brings together trail leaders to meet with their members of Congress, agency officials such as the head of the Forest Service, and to also kind of meet other public lands advocates who are interested in advocating for trails and public lands. For many of our NextGeners, this is their first time ever engaging in kind of direct advocacy, meeting with members of Congress and so what. And it's exciting because all of the individuals are really passionate about public lands and kind of have engaged in kind of public lands in their own way, but haven't yet had the opportunity to engage in direct advocacy. And through our program, we kind of provide them both the training and the support they need, as well as kind of their first experience getting to come to Capitol Hill and meet with their elected officials to really kind of share their voice face to face for the first time. The goal for this is, in addition to being kind of their first experience with direct advocacy, it's to kind of inspire and empower them to continue this work after they leave DC, to continue the conversation with their elected officials as well as kind of the local elected officials within their community. As part of our program also, we blend stewardship into the NextGen program, with each of our participants either hosting or participating in their own National Trails Day event to do either a trails cleanup or some sort of volunteer project, and then as well during the event to engage in some form of advocacy. Last year, when the Land and Water Conservation Fund was needing to be reauthorized by Congress, our NextGeners and the broader National Trails Day event incorporated a postcard campaign that every participant at National Trails Day could then send a postcard to their elected official, encouraging them to protect trails and save the LWCF. And our NextGeners were really engaged in this and kind of provided kind of the support and the kind of public attention needed to really make this effort successful. And also each of our NextGeners this year, which is an added kind of development in our program, are provided the opportunity to participate in a volunteer vacation as well, to really kind of get that hands-on trail maintenance experience. Also throughout the year, we continue to engage with the trail leaders, including through social media, to provide them an outlet to grow their audiences and kind of shape their voices around public land and kind of public land advocacy. And we also support our NextGeners for different scholarship opportunities that arise to attend conferences or other professional development opportunities. Our overall goal is that hopefully at the end of the year, the NextGen trail leaders will have the tools and the training to continue their advocacy efforts, to begin new efforts in their own communities, and then also remain part of the American Hiking Society network for years to come and kind of continue to share and shape their voice. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thanks, Tyler. So we're going to start off asking each of our panelists a question, but we really want to hear from all of you who are on the call. So please start throwing into the Q&A some questions, and we will get to those right after we start with these few. So Jeanette, we're going to start with you, and what we would like to know from you is, why are emerging leaders programs especially important right now at this point in time?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that's a great one. My answer to that would be, now is the time to amplify the voices and the means that we can all conduct our business to increase access to outdoor lands, to increase diversity, to increase connectivity of people to our open spaces through recreation education. And I think as an industry as a whole, we're young and we're learning quickly. But if we can leverage, again, associations and other entities that have structures and place these young professionals, these emerging leaders, to basically just supersonically move ahead and not have to go through the growing pains that it took to maybe build organizations and infrastructures, but to take their passion, their interests, their service-minded work, and to tell the stories better than my generation, the generations before me. I think that's why it's such a great time to develop, to invest in, and to cultivate emerging leaders programs. So it's the best of both worlds. It's taking the needs and interest of today's young professionals. It's responding to trends in market influences in the industry, and then it's trying to not reinvent the wheel. It's trying to not ride the bike and build it at the same time. So, again, in summary, I think my answer to this question is that organizations like mine and the others on this phone call, or others that couldn't join us today, have spent a lot of time in building governance and structures and trying to connect people. But now is an opportunity for people to enter in and again, amplify and leverage their work in a more meaningful way, to not get caught down in perhaps the administrative or infrastructure tasks, and really just work on the message and connecting with people.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jeanette. All right, Tyler, for you, how do you measure success in your program, and what tells you that your program has had an impact?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think for us, it comes down to two things. The first being that kind of after our participants go through our year-long program, that they leave it feeling empowered to advocate on their own and really to continue the work in their own communities and kind of nationwide. I think one of the ways that we kind of measure whether that's successful or not is whenever we first begin the program, we kind of do an assessment of what kind of experience our NextGen trail leaders have in advocacy. Nearly all of them have never engaged in kind of direct advocacy before. And so they kind of come to Hike the Hill and kind of our other programs a little apprehensive, just not knowing what to expect. And I think after they kind of go through kind of the training and we provide them the resources and they really get to have this kind of new face-to-face experience in DC, we've seen that nearly all of them have left that saying that I really feel like I have a voice now and that my voice can be used to advocate. And so I think that's really important. I think the other way that we kind of measure our success in the programs is whether there's continued engagement year over year. When we first started our NextGen program, we had about 35 applicants apply. And then last year, when we entered into our second year of this, we had over 140 applicants. And I think a lot of those applicants were spread from word of mouth from prior participants, encouraging their networks to apply. And so I think that was kind of great success. In addition to that, we've also seen our alternative break program grow year over year, and with both kind of interest in schools and interest in kind of our funders for the programs increasing. I think that's kind of how we measure success. And then lastly, obviously, our whole goal of this is to move advocacy for public lands forward. And I think kind of the direct measuring of that is whenever we have meetings on Capitol Hill with our NextGen trail leaders and they get promises directly from members of Congress that they're going to support a specific piece of legislation or a bill, I think that's kind of a great measure of success, because we see that the results are really kind of, their asks are really producing results.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tyler. And Juan, can you share an example of the ways emerging leaders from your program have made an impact on their communities?
Yeah, thanks. So one of the things that I think we're really proud of Fresh Tracks is that we're not a single issue platform of engagement, just like communities aren't a single issue, and really challenging the paradigm of what it means to be a conservation and outdoor rec leader. And so a lot of that looks very different, and challenging what a leader looks like in our definition and what they do. So, for example, Devin Edwards out of the My Brother's Keeper initiative in Boston is developing a community action plan that is focused mostly on back to school events and making sure that the children in his community have the necessities, everything from basics of pens and paper to backpacks to a fresh haircut to what they need. But one of the things that he's integrated into that is facilitated dialogue and healing space in the local park, and inviting public officials to hear those issues that may not necessarily be related to public land access, but are happening on public lands. And so by default, these leaders start to become, have a better appreciation of what it means to have these kind of spaces, to be able to reflect, to have these conversations, and to have interactions with their own civic leaders. And so that's one example. The other example that I would highlight is Kira Antone out of the Native American Women's Association at Washington State University. She's the president there, but after coming through some of the Fresh Tracks training, really recognizing that the impact and the trauma that happens across some of the siloed organizations out there. So she, through Fresh Tracks, is facilitating a convening of the student groups at the university that are affiliated with race, gender, equity, whatever their affiliation may be. So the Black Lives Matters group, the Latino Association, the Mecha Union, the LGBTQ Straight Alliance, and bringing those together and facilitating, again, a dialogue that's happening in the local parks, in these spaces where some of the healing of the trauma that happens through intergenerational trauma can start happening. And so while we are really leveraging the platform of nature as a facilitator for healing and learning and public land access, we're leveraging that to really focus on the bigger equity systems that are out there, or systems of inequity and justice that we're looking to address.
Great, thanks, Juan. So we have a theme of some of our questions that's talking about recruitment and how we, so recruitment basically and how we promote the programs. So one of the questions I want to ask you, or that is being asked, is what strategies do you use to recruit your leaders, or to share out your, communicate the programs, and how do you ensure that you're reaching just a non-white audience, or that you're reaching a diverse audience to bring people in? Whoever wants to take that.
I can make a go at that. I think it begins. We're a national network of organizations, and so we're very much invested in our partnerships. Center for Native American Youth, with the Children in Nature Network through the Natural Leaders Network, and the My Brother's Keeper initiative and OYU. So really relying on those networks, and I think more than anything, making those authentic connections at the local and regional level, because recognizing that these are some of the organizations that are doing the hard work on the ground day to day, and what we as Fresh Tracks come to offer is a difference, is a skill set that's for a certain amount of time that will hopefully be invested back into that organization and that community, and recognizing that our role is that, but being very transparent and authentic in that from the very beginning, and not trying to come in and take credit for any of the work that these young leaders are doing, because granted, these young leaders are doing amazing work in their own right through their own organizations, but being a conduit for highlighting the work that they are doing at the national and international scope, and advocating for those resources to be facilitated down to those to the organizations that are doing the day-to-day work.
Great, thanks. And Jeanette, I know that you had put an answer into, you had typed an answer into the answer box, but can you share your answer just to make sure that everybody hears to this question?
Yeah, I certainly can. So when we started this program, we sent it out to member and potential member lists that we had. But through the years, AORE has tried to develop partnerships with other 501c3s that have specific areas, so LGBTQ or outdoor Afro or Latino outdoors. And so we sent on our information to those groups and asked or requested that they would send out and promote, so they would perhaps give access to people that we wouldn't otherwise be able to get in front of. And then a handful of years ago, we hosted a think tank to bring various groups who are doing that work. There are so many that we are just unaware of. So we just invited as many people to come together, and we all tried to brainstorm a list over, I think, quarterly phone calls over a year to generate a list of names or points of contact. From just from all. We just kind of kept on asking the question, who's not here that you might know of, or someone else that you might know of can help us add to this list. And so we tried to send our information out to those points of contact that we were able to generate.
Great, thanks. And then Tyler, and then maybe Juan, you can also answer this one too, but Tyler, why don't you start? We have a question that says, do you think that organizations developing leadership platforms, through experience outdoors on public lands have a responsibility to include public land advocacy for its preservation and leadership programs? I feel like this is right up your alley.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. The whole reason why we really try to combine stewardship and direct advocacy is we know that all the stewardship work across the country that's going on is amazing and fantastic, but if we have policies that are coming out of the federal government that either defund the opportunity for those kind of programs to continue or cut our national monuments and cut off access to our public lands, that is going to have such a huge impact on people's continued access to public lands that it almost makes the stewardship work not obsolete. But if you have these drastic cuts and impacts coming kind of that can be addressed through advocacy, like you definitely need to address those along with the stewardship in order to kind of have a comprehensive approach. So
great, thanks. And Juan, did you want to weigh in on that? And no is an acceptable answer.
Sorry, I was getting off of mute. Yeah, so I think one of the hats that I wear is sitting on the council for the Wilderness Society, and so public land advocacy I think is integrated into the DNA of every program that has the responsibility to curate a positive experience in the outdoors, whether that's everything from a gardening club in the backyard of a school to a hyper expedition like Knowles or Outward Bound. The thing that I think is a challenge for us as a community, as a movement, is to recognize that there's a ladder of engagement, and that you can't just go from point A to point B and that's the end of it, but that there's point A, B, C, D, and sometimes you'll have to skip the Z in order to get to a positive outcome. So making sure that all those voices are included in the advocacy for public land spaces, but more importantly than anything, recognizing the voices that aren't in that room that need to be accounted for. And so that looks different for every organization on this panel, and I think for every organization that's attending. So figuring out where we can best leverage our resources to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable to making sure that the equitable voice, the voice that's represented from the organization, is recognizing the equity or the inequity, and even in our own platforms.
Great, thank you. Another question. So I know we talked a little bit about, I know actually some of your programs are relatively young, but one of the questions is, how are you all tracking where your emerging leaders are going and what they're doing after your programs? Or how do you plan to continue tracking this? And are there any plans to sort of collectively track to see like how all these programs are working together to produce these new leaders?
So for us at Fresh Tracks, we lucked out that we linked up with Dr. Sharani Little out of the University of Southern California, and she is based out of the their business school at USC and focuses mostly on leadership. And so she has been curating our evaluation from the very beginning and really has implemented some long-term strategy for us. So we're looking at 3 years of data from where we initiated with our pilot and have about a 5 to 10 year projection of where our evaluation will go to. And that a lot of it is reliant on the leaders being able to respond. But I think a lot of it is also we benefit from that peer-to-peer mentoring model because these leaders hold themselves accountable to each other, not only because they are leaders, but friendships and bonds that are solidified through in-person experiences and other experiences throughout the year help to amplify that. And so they go beyond what we're talking about and really connecting with each other. So our hope here is that within 10 years, we'll start to see some of the real, some of those powerful places where these leaders will land.
Great. And I know Jeanette and Tyler, your programs are still pretty young as well. But do you guys have any sort of long-term plans for the tracking of your leaders?
I think that's a great question. So right now ours has been more of a self-reflection and with our surveying and seeing if the tools that was made available, which ones they leveraged or not, and kind of their feedback has been more of a kind of an internal reflection. But I think that is something that would be very easy to do. As you mentioned, we are quite young and only 2 years into this process. And our scope has been relatively small with the number of individuals we've been able to impact, not the end users that they're impacting, which is much larger. But I think that's a great question. It's something that would be easy to do.
Yeah, and I would just add, we're also a younger program. Kind of we maintain contact with our NextGeners kind of after they participate in the program and are looking at kind of ways that they can continue to remain active and kind of affiliated with both American Hiking Society, whether becoming an ambassador or something else. But I thank you, Juan, for bringing the question up about the tracking and stuff, because what your organization's doing, that just giving me more ideas for what we should be learning from and doing also. So thanks.
Love it. Great minds. All right. So other questions for you. How are your emerging leaders programs funded? And this also sort of may also tie into, in what ways do you work to eliminate barriers for applicant participation? So the cost of programs, travel expenses, et cetera. So how are they funded, and then how do you offset the costs for the participants?
I can start. So our 2 inaugural years have been funded by a small but generous package from the National Park Service, and that was able to offset some of the costs. But really, the association has taken on the balance of that, and I don't currently have a sustainable model to fund it or to try to remove additional barriers. So right now, the board and I are trying to navigate that and trying to figure out what and how we can do that. Cognizant that we need to, but we have not figured out a revenue stream to offset the expenses for it. So right now we are just paying for it out of our balance of the association. So the association itself is subsidizing it at a cost.
Yeah, and I'd say for American Hiking Society, we have funders through REI, Columbia, Merrill, and kind of other retailers and companies that are really committed to kind of youth engagement and kind of advocacy as well for public lands. And so that has helped us to be able to run this program. In terms of how to remove barriers kind of for participation, we recognize that kind of different income levels and backgrounds have different capacities to participate. And so as part of our program, everything is kind of covered by American Hiking Society. For example, like the trip to Washington, D.C. to participate in Hike the Hill is fully covered, as well as participation in our National Trails Day event. We offer stipends to help with travel and stuff like that. And then also really try to find opportunities that come about throughout the year to sponsor individuals to participate in different conferences that are maybe offering scholarships. Like we've recommended individuals last year who've received scholarships to kind of for that further and continue kind of their interest in this area.
Yeah, and I'll just add to Jeanette's point. I think philanthropy is a funny world in terms of building out long-term sustainable engagement with funders to really see the return on investment, especially when you're working in cohorts where we're building champions for the movement. And that's been a bit of an opportunity and a challenge for us at Fresh Tracks. And so we're while we've been fortunate and happy to have the support of some of the key funders that I mentioned earlier, we're consistently looking for developing the strategy and adapting to the philanthropy trends that are out there. And so every year there'll be a new trend, and having to adapt to that and figuring out how our model can benefit from those trends as well. And so, in a way, calling philanthropy out a little bit and being able to say that there's some within these three panelists, and I'm sure some of the organizations out there, there's some very sustainable solutions to community focus and youth driven challenges and solutions. But sometimes all you need is the right person at the right time to fund that long-term vision and strategy. And so, in short, our funding strategy and philanthropy is a mix of government, government foundation, and private donors that support Fresh Tracks, and we're happy to do that. And we've been blessed to be able to do that. Some of the ways that we are eliminating barriers is the no-cost program for our leaders, recognizing that some of our leaders are really not the ones who raise their hand, but the ones that show leadership potential. So we'll recruit and curate that through local grassroots organizations and make sure that there's an accountability measure there as well, so that while they are coming on this experience at our cost, that there is a direct link to the accountability that the local organization, the local partner can work with them and foster that leadership as they continue to work on it.
Great, thanks everybody, that's super helpful. Question, how do you scale this down for younger groups, high school or even middle school? Do any of you have experience with that?
This is Jeanette on behalf of AORE. That currently is not a demographic that the association is focused on, so we don't currently serve K through 12.
Juan, does your program,
yeah.
Do you guys do younger students?
We don't. So we recognize that there's a lot of great organizations that are focused on the population of 18 and under. And so our hope is that we can pick up the leaders that are either in the between stages of going to college, or finding their career path, and support them in finding those paths. And so we are focused on the population of 18 and over that's kind of out on their own and looking for those opportunities to engage. And that's where most of our work focuses on. Although we're open to collaborating with other organizations that focus on 18 and under groups and offering up our leaders as potential mentors and supporters on events and things like that. But we currently don't focus primarily on that population, although I think that the question about scaling and how that happens is a good one.
Fantastic. Another question, what are the ways your organizations are supporting emerging leaders to move to positions of power in either your respective organizations or similar organizations? So is this sort of an on-ramp into a career with you or similar organizations?
Yeah, so this is Juan again. I think one of my favorite new curriculum pieces is going to be that we're currently developing is a one-on-one on how to serve on a board for young leaders. And so many of our young leaders are being asked to serve on local boards or positions of power, and sometimes they're, for better or for worse, they're just kind of thrown in there and sink or swim kind of moments. And so our hope is that by taking some of the lessons learned and some of the experiences from our own cohort, that we can share those best lessons learned and best practices about what it really means to be a young person on a board of directors. And so that's one way that we're hoping to address that, as well as many of our leaders are actually running for offices, civic leadership offices in their own communities. So supporting them in those campaigns, and some of their community actions are supporting their leadership development to be able to have the skill sets to be able to run for those offices. So we have a couple of them that ran for office in a couple of school boards last year, and some of their local tribal councils, as well as their local city councils.
And yeah, I'll just add, this is Tyler. As part of our program, when we brought all of our NextGeners to Washington, D.C., we organized a mentoring session with different kind of mid-career individuals within different advocacy organizations, such as like the National Parks Conservation Association, the Next 100 Coalition. We also had agency staffers who kind of came and shared their experiences and how they got to their careers, as well as kind of offering resources to kind of entering into those fields. And then following that, we provided them with a little bit of a resource guide that really kind of allowed them to do follow-up and continue kind of networking and making connections to really allow them to move into kind of those types of positions and careers.
And as far as AORE is concerned, Juan, I really like hearing what you are about to and trying to create a curriculum there. But we've really done a deep dive on kind of our volunteer engagement and looking to really clarify and document expectation to service, both in committee leads, task force leads, and board leadership. We've created an application process so we can really give a mutually beneficial experience to both the volunteer person as well as to the association, to make sure that things are in alignment. So we've actually gotten more specific in that process, and then we're challenging ourselves to make sure that committees are composed of people that represent across the membership or across different demographics, to be the most robust in their area of work, and not allowing us just to kind of pick the next leadership by turning back and saying, here's someone I've worked with. We've asked people to self-evaluate, what they think they've done in their leadership role. We've asked people on committees to give feedback to committee leadership to say what they cared for and areas for improvement. So that kind of provides the most robust experience, again, for the volunteer and in leadership succession planning to allow for and make sure that these doorways are open, but also making sure that we're being realistic. And so that's why I was really excited, wanted to hear you talk about that board service, that we've got to make sure that people are empowered and enabled, but also understand what the work contains and that they can have a positive experience and not feel, I was going to say, use the word like violated or, tokenized, but learn how to embrace and engage, to have dialogue, to challenge, to support the organization, be it in a political spectrum or in a nonprofit of where they're serving. So those are some things that we're trying to do, is just to be more intentional and not allow ourselves just to recruit from the same pool over and over again, to do the harder work, to make the questions and cultivate those future leaders.
Great, thanks everyone. So it looks like we have room for one more question. I apologize if we didn't get to your question, but I think this is a really positive, great one to end on. And that is, what can other organizations and people on this call do to support you and your programs? How can we help you be awesome and continue the work that you're doing?
I think for us, if you hear of any funding opportunities, whether those are foundations or individuals who want to support this kind of work, please feel free to engage and make those introductions. The other part is to keep an eye out for some of the leaders that maybe sometimes aren't the first ones to raise their hand, but the ones that show the leadership potential and oftentimes are just looking for that opportunity to engage with something meaningful. And so if you have any of those leaders, we are more than happy at Fresh Tracks to be a part of their leadership development.
I would echo what Juan just said, both with funding. Again, there's three great programs on this webinar and many more that are listed at the start. And so I think the dollars do inhibit the ability to scale these. And so you can probably hear the intention and excitement in all three of us to do more of this work. But it has to be relative to capacity and building it so that we do good, solid work and not just try to be all things to all people is critical to that. Again, supporting what Juan said, volunteers or people, we know that you need to ask people. Just sending out emails or posting on websites doesn't always allow for engagement. And so it takes some person suggesting or nudging a colleague, a friend, a professional to say, did you know about or have you heard about? You should check it out. And then the last thing I would just say is just asking those questions. Really appreciate it's a generous question to ask, but saying, opening it up and challenging us all in this space to say who's doing what. And if one model or program doesn't fit, there might be another one.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think kind of the best applicants that we've had from this program have come from recommendations of other people who've really kind of noticed, who've really kind of superstars who maybe wouldn't have come out of the limelight. And that has really helped us kind of create a great program. I would also say that encourage you to participate in one of our National Trails Day events or host your own event to really kind of encourage people from your community and kind of all communities across the country to kind of get outside, and then also participate in our volunteer vacations, which all that information is available on our website at americanhiking.org.
Great, thanks everybody. So for all of you who are on the call, this webinar was recorded, and everyone who was on the call or RSVP'd and was not able to make it will get a link to the webinar on YouTube. There'll be a YouTube link for it within the next 48 hours, so you can share that out. Thank you again for attending. It'll also be available on TYO, so if you, it's again, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's free to join. It's mytyo.org. And there's a ton of amazing resources on there as well for anyone working with youth or getting people outdoors. And I would just like to give a great big thank you again to our presenters, Juan, Jeanette, and Tyler, and for taking the time today to share about your amazing emerging leader programs. And thank you for supporting our young adults in this next step in their careers and advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye.